All right, we're live. All right, thanks everyone for joining us today. I'm here with David Shaw, the CEO and founder at Lively. Going to share a little bit around how Lively works with operators, obviously talking about getting to LES. And for a reminder for everyone who's listening in, we talk about selling into property maintenance and stop selling into this real estate world. A lot of the conversations are about like introducing new ideas, trying different things. And ultimately as sellers, we want to make sure we're serving the right people the right way versus just talking kind of at everybody. And because we're mindful of our time and mindful of the prospect's time. So a lot of the conversations, all these conversations end up gravitating towards how we find hell yes. And hell yes is really about problem solving, not about selling. And so, a lot of the conversations and questions flows, if you follow the series, it's really about how different sellers find prospects that are in that hell yes state. And respectfully, we're looking to find the problems that they're looking to solve that are their priorities and then match our solution to those priorities. And so, David, thank you for joining us today. Really appreciate you coming on board. Before I forget, you're speaking at Redcon in a couple of weeks.
Correct.
So I'll be there as well. So I'll be able to check in on that. Look forward to that. Tell us a little about yourself, how you got in this role, and then the problem that you solve with Lively.
Absolutely. It's great to be here. I'm really excited and looking forward to this. I wound up at Lively from a series of moments of recognizing the opportunity in front of me and having great mentorship that has allowed me to seize it. We were talking a little bit beforehand. I grew up in Minneapolis after a long series of events and happened to be in the backyard of Best Buy's corporate office and really was put in a position where I could seize an opportunity around their transformation to this model of customer centricity, and went there from a part-time sales rep to a customer centricity sales manager, and then a regional coach on deploying this idea of customer centricity, which was tailoring their stores to this specific market demographic that their store served. And so I learned a ton there, and that journey took me to Chicago. And in Chicago, I was working as an actor and a writer and bartending and doing side gigs here. And
yep.
In 2008, when all those bartending gigs started to dry up and all those side hustles started to get tougher to land, I went to a job fair at Sears Tower. And I'm sorry, it'll always be Sears Tower to me, not Willis Tower.
Willis Tower, yeah.
And I sat for 3 hours with 300 other people for a part-time barista role, and landed at a store with a great regional vice president. And we were the pilot market for the implementation of the Toyota production system, like the lean thinking concept of manufacturing. And it just resonates with the way my brain works. And so that catapulted me into a regional operations coach position where I was responsible for, training and teaching and mentoring the deployment of this new production model at Starbucks. I spent nearly 10 years at Starbucks, incredible company. I learned a lot about servant leadership and human-based empathetic leadership. While I was there, I went back to school to finish my degree at Northwestern. And my first quarter there, I realized that a lot of the things that I thought were maybe Starbuckian in nature were really just classic business philosophies that had sort of been white labeled or repurposed. And it really sparked something in me about the idea of building a culture and building an organization and building a business. And so in my first quarter at Northwestern, I went and started in the startup world. I started looking for startup companies in a couple high growth industries, real estate and property tech being one of them. Landed, a really exciting and great opportunity where I learned a lot at Hello Alfred and really got, sort of thrown into the deep end of the startup world with the trust and the autonomy and the speed at which organizations move. When that ended, I consulted a little bit in the space and got to sort of dabble and pick and choose around different companies in the space and see what was working, see how they were viewing the problems in the industry, how they were approaching the solutions. And my job at Lively really started with just a cold email to the two co-founders of, hey, I've been working on this for the last couple of years. If this is a priority for you in the coming year, I'd love to have a conversation and see how I can be a resource. And so Joined Lively ultimately after a consulting stint as a director of business operations. That grew into VP of operations. And 2 years ago was named the COO, and then this past 2024 January was named president and COO.
Congratulations.
I've just been building an incredibly awesome company with amazing people, and the thing that ultimately landed me at Lively was the way that Lively was built to solve the problems that I was hearing from property management around resident experience and workforce retention at the property manager and site team level. Made the most sense. It was truly a technology forward solution. It was built around optimization and efficiency, and ultimately creating a product that all the stakeholders actually used. And that was really the key differentiator that I felt I could build on at the company and deliver a stronger value proposition. And so that gets me to the seat that I'm sitting in today.
So for the problem that people are feeling, like, are they feeling an active burn with talent or an active burn on renewal? Like, what's the kind of the filter that you guys seek to kind of like shortlist prospects?
Yeah, I think it's sort of threefold. One, in the pandemic, there was this seismic shift in the workforce dynamic, and the balance of power really shifted to employees from employers. And a lot of our customers felt the pain of that. And so it was around trying to implement tools and programs and processes that made the jobs more attractive and to improve their employee retention. So that was sort of the first bucket.
No. So it's curious about obviously like our company, the last two letters are customer experience, right? It's something I've been obsessing about for years and years and years and years. And share with you the passion for the consumer experience, be it the employee experience or the consumer part of the experience. Share I'll say like the gains of being able to position that in the right place. One thing I've always struggled with from a CX perspective is in low frequency transactions, the priority for CX did not rise to the top.
Yep.
And I'll give you my personal example. I started a company in 2012. It was a hockey stick company. We kind of broke the mold in terms of how hockey sticks were being sold in the world. And regrettably, I didn't protect our IP that well. We had bad advice. We were the fastest growing company forever and ever for a couple of years, sorry. And then things, we didn't protect our IP. Yep. The lesson how we conquered the market was through customer experience.
Yep.
Because we were not a big brand. We entered into consumer goods market, and we did all these things all based on the backs of our customers. It was amazing.
Yep.
This is a pre-influencer era, pre-Google review era, kind of like started out the brand that way. It's a real groundswell. And we did it cheap. We did all those things. But ultimately, we are serving a B2C problem. In B2B, like we've always kind of like had to filter on people that are trying to solve a customer problem.
Yep.
And of our customer scope, we sell faster where there is a high volume, there's a high frequency of rebuy and transaction, because you're trying to build that recurring buyer with the CX side of things. And you can we could quantify the ROI of a customer experience investment. Mm-hmm. I'd love to hear how you guys doing how you're doing this in property management. How are you making that a priority? How do you find people where it's a priority?
Yeah, and I think my time at Starbucks makes me uniquely positioned to that space. An average district is a $15 million portfolio, and it's built at $3.45 per transaction, right? Mm-hmm. Where you have to invest in what Starbucks called that third place experience, so that when they're on their way to work, they're coming into your Starbucks store and making that daily purchase, that daily $3.45 that adds up to the portfolio. And in prop tech, the big problem that we recognized, particularly after 2020, there's this proliferation of prop tech point solutions. There's hundreds of millions of dollars being invested in this space. There's hundreds of new startups that were opening every single year. And so what we were hearing from customers was negative ROI. They're implementing these tools, they're implementing this technology, but for one reason or another, there's solutions that the site team aren't using, or more importantly, there's solutions that the residents aren't using. And so we really built a product that goes beyond the utilitarian function of paying rent or submitting a maintenance ticket. So building an experiential platform that drives engagement and community and truly gives time back to the property managers. And so it's this idea of having stakeholders that enjoy using the product so that the money that they're investing into the platform is actually being utilized and creating tangible results. And, so we're a B2B to C, right? Our primary customer is always the site team and the management group. And then our end stream customer is the resident, right? And so building features that are going to keep them within the Lively ecosystem so that all of the benefits and efficiencies and automations can be realized by the site team and make their job easier. And through that, driving the retention, driving the engagement, driving the sentiment, we can see empirical data on the impact that we have to the reputation of the property, to the renewal of leases, to the amount of hours saved by the site team. Across our entire portfolio, we're averaging 3 site team members at every property logging into Lively every single day. That's unheard of in the industry. We have over 100,000 active users in Lively at any given time. And so being able to build a platform that's sticky, that actually solves a problem and addresses the experiential needs of both the staff and the residents is really where we focused our vision on customer experience, building an experience that draws people in and keeps them a part of the ecosystem.
Going back to when you first started at Lively, was that kind of like, was that in the 2020 era or was that 2020?
Yeah, late 2020.
Late 2020. So, like a lot of companies kind of come into that, you've got a hook on a problem that feels like product market fit. This happened to us. And then 2022, 2023 hits, and like where you thought you had product market fit, your market moved.
Yep.
How did things go at Lively?
Yeah, we actually got stronger. And a big reason for that is it allowed Lively to be viewed in the industry as subject matter experts in the space. Right?
Gotcha.
Everybody was scrambling for answers at that time, and ownership and property managers were throwing solutions at the wall and just trying to see what sticks. And I think less disciplined companies be easy to chase the shiny object, right, and get distracted and get away from your core principle. And we really doubled down on the solution we were providing and making enhancements and some feature improvements that people are asking for that made sense. But really, that was a unique inflection point for us where our ability to guide our customers to ask the right questions and to explore the market in a real and meaningful way just brought them back to Lively, right? And understood that the way we were solving problems were delivering that tangible return on investment.
So with respect to the problem, so like who's specific, what's kind of the role that chooses to buy Lively?
Yeah, normally we are a top-down model. And so we're an enterprise-grade solution. We touch a number of aspects of the resident experience and site team operations. And so normally it's a VP of operations or even a C-suite brand champion, and then down through marketing directors where they have a problem they're trying to solve around resident retention or property reputation. And then through our channel sales, we're coming through on the access control piece where we're coming in with alongside the hardware tech stack that they've selected for the building. And we're unifying and automating a lot of those processes that can require multiple backends or take a lot of opportunity cost away from what the site team should be focused on.
Yep, that makes most perfect sense. Do you find that and so my background, my career, I just spent probably 20 years in OpEx, kind of like operational excellence type, asset intensive, that sort of stuff. So share a lot of your background, I should say, a lot of your background in the lean side of things and regional and operations. And then again, it's great to chat to somebody who's kind of sitting or at least a similar mindset around how that applies to customer centricity.
Yep.
And so like what I found is that probably even why our business exists is because the intersection of lean principles with customer centricity, I found there was just so much waste.
Yep.
And the part of me that like keeps me up at night on the lean side would just be like screaming at the rooftops
Absolutely.
the waste that's happening on the customer side of things. And then like orient, and then getting even more frustrated when people don't see it.
Yep.
And then what I find sometimes we'll do a demo and someone literally will see, well, now I can't unsee this. This changes everything.
Exactly.
So how do you exist in that? I mean, I appreciate welcome to the party.
Exactly.
But like, how do you, when you take a look at opportunities before you, or even segments to go pursue, how do you shortlist that to those that will consider Lively or consider even this problem to solve?
Yeah. I think, in the early days, Lively was a solution for early adopters, right? It was a very tech forward owners and operators in the space that were trying to understand how to solve these problems more efficiently. Internally within our culture, we are, Kaizen on steroids, right? It is the concept of continuous improvement. And a big part of that is the root cause analysis, right? Making sure that you're solving the problem and not the symptom.
Yep.
And a lot of times what we're hearing from customers is this feeling of death by 1,000 paper cuts, right? And so they haven't standardized or they haven't built processes because they haven't gotten to the root cause analysis of what's causing the pain points, right? And so they're trying to fight 1,000 wars instead of winning the one primary battle.
They're just in the treadmill. They're just in the treadmill.
Exactly. Exactly. And so being able to come in and understand, as a platform that was built by owners and operators in the space, having firsthand experience on what those challenges were and what those problems were, it was a lab to really explore what that root cause analysis was. And then once you have that, then you can start to standardize the work and make it, the repeatable routine that's prominent in lean methodology. And then once you build the repeatable routine, the thing that has made Lively different since 2017 when we were founded is the first question we always ask is, how can we solve this with technology? Right? Not how can we subsidize it, not how can we support it. The first question is always, how do we make this a technological solution rather than a tech augmented human solution? And so if you follow through that step of really getting to a solid root cause, understanding the work that can be standardized and systematized, and then with our incredible product and engineering team, very creative ways to automate or streamline that process so that it either happens with just oversight and approval from a site team member or from a decision maker, or fully automated where we're just delivering the outcome. And so that's really how I've sort of reconciled what you're speaking to of maybe a perceived friction of, efficiency and operational excellence in a world of property management, which is human rich, and with human, influence comes chaos and unpredictability. Being able to marry those two worlds and create a solution that ultimately solves a problem that maybe hasn't even been uncovered yet.
That's kind of like, I say we're getting better at identifying the language that people are using to solve the problem, but we still, I mean, this is the nature of being in a startup company, is you still need to be solving a novel problem. And so, we choose to educate the world about a couple things, but it's still, one thing we got to catch ourselves on is that making sure that we're not talking at the audience and that we're engaging the audience. And so like when I try and structure our education points as questions versus like my opinion, because like my opinion is really irrelevant to the audience I'm talking to. It's just my opinion.
Yeah. In the world of social media and LinkedIn influencers, talking heads are a dime a dozen. And so everybody has an opinion, and it's really easy to get your opinion in front of people. It's much harder to, build a connection and, to your point, like lead a decision maker to the problem that they're trying to solve.
Yeah. And then what we've, like you, we sell it, I'll say middle range, but then ultimately the end users are at the site level, or the experience happens at the site level. And so ultimately they've got to not only convince those that see the vision and buy into the problem, or the problem maybe resonates in their chair, and then ultimately deploying it down to end users. That like we talk about how like we, celebrating that change, that commitment to change at the field level is something that we started doing a long time ago. And obviously, I think there's different. Like I was listening to the folks at AppWork talking about how they have badges, and there's just different ways of rewarding folks for committing to change. And I'm finding that that's something that we all need to kind of think through, because like change is difficult, right? And you can commit to change at the high level, and you kind of feel like sometimes it's like those old World War II movies where they're standing above a map and they're just moving armies around, but not really on the battleground. But when you deploy it down to the battleground and start getting feedback from those users, that you ultimately really understand the change that you're affecting. Absolutely. And like we do like weekly, when we onboard somebody, we'll do a retro like day 2, and then retro day 7, and then we'll do a retro day 14. We want to make sure we hear the things that the friction that they're feeling on day 1, like right away, so we can, de-risk it as we go forward in deployment. And that's something like, super respectful of solutions that employ that, sell at a high level and then deploy at a low level. Because ultimately, like, we have to be thinking about, we call them experts, but like we have to be thinking about that experts first. And so customer centricity extends to user centricity, as well as the value you're delivering for the person who's, the customer, right? Like the resident in this case. And those two worlds don't always coexist, right? And so like when bringing that back to kind of like, again, hell yes, because they don't exist in the same space, maybe the same city, it's difficult for someone to articulate the problem because they don't even know how to articulate it. So like, using Google as a metaphor for like how customers express their problems. When someone's sitting in front of Google, what are they typing in and you guys show up?
Yeah. I mean, really anything that is asking about centralized multifamily operations, anything that's talking about automated resident experience, anybody that's looking to solve problems around a unified access control solution. Like this advent of 2 years ago, the boom of the centralization term, was great for Lively because that's what we were built on. It was built on bringing all of those stakeholders into a centralized platform. And so as people are exploring, and that trend is moving further and further down market from those early adopters, we're seeing a huge spike in people wanting to centralize their resident events operation. They want to centralize their resident sentiment and reputation management. Now that access control is starting to become more commoditized and coming down further into the market, either through the result of, Class A properties aging into Class B, and they still have smart access and IoT devices in the units, or the affordability of the solutions are allowing them to implement in, Class A minus or Class B plus. The confusion and the pain points that come with a unified tech stack, that's really like our bread and butter right now, because we're really marrying the hardware with the digital amenities, with the physical spaces in the property, and then ultimately everybody that owns, lives, serves, or manages a multifamily community. And we're bringing all of those worlds together in a centralized dashboard.
In a way that the resident can consume it, the field user can consume it, and then the corporate function can consume it.
Yeah, it's one of the challenges in the space is we're almost selling to 3 or 4 different stakeholders. In each deal cycle, right? And to your point of continued support, every customer that comes on to Lively gets a dedicated customer success manager, They go through a full white glove onboarding and training. We have monthly calls with all of our customers, quarterly reviews where we share data and collect feedback. Like, it is a perpetual relationship the moment you sign that contract with Lively.
Well, and this is where it's interesting, is that like we're in the renewable revenue business, right? A recurring revenue business, sorry, recurring revenue business. But like multifamily or property management is also in the recurring revenue business, but it doesn't hit them on the head just quite yet. Like in customer experience is a C-level role in recurring revenue businesses, because that's like how you're valued. And the parallel is like, it's right there. But for years, we've been so concerned about acquisition that acquisition was driving the bus.
Yep.
But really the business is about recurring revenue and asset valuations. And so, simple, everybody who's been in a math class knows that the denominator drives the result more than the numerator. And so if you keep on extending the value of that asset and the return on that and the reliability of that revenue, the asset's going to become a greater and have more value to it. But we've been so consumed about acquisition. And even now you're feeling like, okay, renewals are starting to stabilize. Rents are lower than they used to be, but renewals are starting to stabilize. And maybe we don't need to worry about customer experience anymore. But I do think that the as long as interest rates stay where they are, the multiplier effect of having forecastable revenue is going to keep it a priority. Because like the fact that 50% of renters churn out is really kind of crazy in a renewable revenue business. Like if you lost the amount of energy that it goes to fill that leaky bucket is exhausting.
Yep. Yeah, it was really exciting for me last year when I was on sort of the conference circuit, starting to hear so many more operators openly and aggressively talk about like midline P&L controllables, right? And having that vision shift from just top line, maximum rents or acquisition of new properties, and really now starting to turn the microscope to how do we expand the middle of our P&L savings so that, to your point, that denominator continues to grow and inflate so that the overall asset value is driven even higher.
I love that you're using the same language, like the middle P&L part, right? Because like you take a look at that controllable, and we used to do all this time in OpEx world, is like your revenue line is relatively, if you're in a price taking, this is mentality of price makers versus price takers. So if you're a price taker, which is a lot of rental units are now, or a lot of the rental businesses now, you're a price taker to relative to your market, then you need to be an operationally, you're being forced in an OpEx mindset. You don't have a choice. Yep. Price makers, on the other hand of it, don't need to be as OpEx oriented, because they can make price and the revenue gaps out maybe some inefficiencies in OpEx. And then take at the bottom part of the P&L, like below the NOI line, look at insurance and interest rate and property taxes, all the uncontrollables. Uncontrollables have grown significantly. You've got 8% year-over-year growth of your middle part of expenses in your middle part, and your revenue is at 2 to 3%. So there's like a real crush on the middle, and that middle part is what drives. There's a hard line correlation between that middle part of the P&L and your rental renewals. And so if you don't manage it, you're going to be out of business.
100%, absolutely.
And it's got to be really awkward for some of these managers to be asking for checks from their owners, because the squeeze happens so fast.
Yeah, when you're experiencing high unit churn, when just as devastating is when you're experiencing high employee turnover and churn at properties. And to your point, like the cost that goes into plugging that bucket is just exponentially greater, than the cost of just maintaining your current reliable and consistent revenues.
Mm-hmm. When folks are looking at solutions out there and they've kind of gone to Google, what other alternatives are they considering?
Yeah, I think we're in an interesting space where some of the like legacy PMS systems are hearing the calls for help from their customers. And so a lot of times what's happening is they're seeing, some variation of a solution coming down from their legacy partner where they're managing their accounting and financing or lease documentation. And it's, I don't want to call it just a check the box exercise, but it's more so of an opportunistic play. I sit on the Multifamily Innovation Council, and the brilliant Chris Kimbrough, who I think you've had on here, really, she really landed it. And I don't want to give her full credit for discovering it, but it definitely resonated with me when she said it. It's like, there's just so many players in the space that are a solution looking for a problem, rather than starting with the problem and working with their customers to solve it. And so, when there's a lot of players in this space that are seeing an opportunity for a cash grab, more or less, right? Or to offer some functionality that's going to retain their current customer base. But it's not their specialty. It's not their expertise. It's not their point of emphasis. And so that's really what you're seeing is just the result of this proliferation in the space of all the point solutions coming to market, because it's an opportunistic market to provide a solution and then going out and trying to match it up to a problem. And so if you're on Google, you're going to see enterprise solutions. You're going to see hundreds of startups that are claiming impact to resident renewal or reputation management. You're going to see a handful of players that are talking about access control. And it's really about understanding what questions to ask. And then the challenge of the market being so muddy right now, you can talk to 5 different companies about what an integration is, and they have 5 different definitions of an integration. You can talk about, resident sentiment, and they have 5 different definitions of resident sentiment is. And so that's really like what makes Google a little dangerous in the space, because words are being co-opted and manipulated or twisted to create the problem that they have a solution for, rather than understanding the problem and being a solution partner.
Sure. How does it go when you talk to somebody about resident experience and they say, well, we've got a theater in the park, movie in the park on Sundays, and we do pizza parties for our residents, and we've got a pickleball court. How do you? Where do you start?
I mean, the first question is, okay, what is all that time spent executing those preventing you from doing in your day job, right? The number of property managers that we've talked to that they've got this second job that they're doing, after 6 o'clock at night to drive this community or drive this engagement or facilitate these events. And because we have an events arm in our company, like, we know firsthand what it takes to find vendors and to market and to get residents to actually show up to events. And so our first question is, what could you be doing better with that time? And how much are you spending to deliver these pop-up events, rather than having a partner that can align with your demographic and provide thematic solutions, and just take that burden off your plate so that you can stay in front of the resident and in front of your business in the most meaningful way possible.
Well, and I think often you get in the argument, the discussion, like, and it's kind of sensitive. You can see it if it comes out, is that, do people really care about those things, right? It's like, you talk to an exec, let's say a leader from like 15 years ago, and hey, their definition of culture was the Friday hug and chug, where everyone goes for wings and beers, right? Where that's not really what culture is anymore. And then you talk about community and like events that are kind of awkward, small talk things are not necessarily what drives the resident experience any longer. And like, it costs you a lot of money, and maybe what you used to do or how people used to operate, but people don't, like, I don't know if that solves the problem anymore, right? But they might have a budget for it, and they've been spending that budget line forever and ever and ever, and so it's kind of already there.
Yeah, and I think, to your point, it's more the subconscious benefit of having those events, right? You talk about getting 1% better every day versus 30% better once a month. And so if you're creating a sort of unified and consistent resident experience, it's almost like the resident doesn't even know they're being influenced, right? They just now know that they know more of their neighbors in the building. They know that they see their property manager more than just when rent is due. They know the maintenance guy that's walking around the grounds or working on their building. And so it's sort of this like downstream ripple effect that the event is just the piece that sort of breaks the surface, but it's creating all of these underwater impacts and benefits to that sentiment of culture and that sentiment of community, right? And then all of a sudden it comes time for their renewal, and they're like, hey, I had a really good year living here. Like all my issues were addressed. My property manager was easy to get a hold of and was communicative. We had fun events. I got to know neighbors. I got to take advantage of amenity spaces that I'm paying for in this property, right? And so all of those things subconsciously feed into that intent, whether or not to renew.
Well, and the subconscious piece, and this is, I think I've had more than a couple of conversations with Chris on this one. She's getting shout outs everywhere. She's an archaeologist. She's an archaeologist. I'll get it right. Oh, she's an archaeologist. She's a doctor. She's a PhD in archaeology. And I'm not. I like to play with dinosaurs as a kid, and I live near Drumheller, so there's lots of whatever. But I do like to dig in on the human condition and learn a little bit about how people like. So you talk about the subconscious. It's actually anthropological, right?
Yep.
You get into our loss aversion, how humans make decision making, and if you're in selling, you've read a lot about the decision making part of the brain versus the modern brain, and you get into loss aversion, right? And so, and how loss aversion relates to customer experience. So customer experience, people will tell you that in a single experience band, people will remember the lowest point and the last point.
Yep.
So nail those always. And we'll do these events to increase the ceiling, but that often gets overlooked relative to the lowest point and the last point. And the last point, especially in multifamily, it's each individual's last point, not the last point of the calendar year. So just because you have a Christmas party or whatever, and my lease comes up in February, I'm remembering what February was like, not what the Christmas party was. And so what's harder to do is to raise the floor and make it easy to live there.
Yep.
Right. That's a harder thing to accomplish than it is to plan a party. And so I'm probably over rotating on the events coordinators of the world, but while that is important, if you throw a party, it's like saying I'm sorry for something. Like if you throw a party after delivering a horrible, a consistently below expectation customer experience, all you're doing is bringing people together to complain about what's not working.
Yeah. Yep.
And so like the opportunity in property management is to look at the floor. And if you just raise the floor and make it easy, and remove the pain, right? This is the loss aversion, the cave person inside every single human. So it goes beyond subconscious. It's survival. This is why we're overpopulating the planet, is because we survive regardless of the circumstances that are thrown at us.
Yeah.
And because the way we choose.
Yep. Well, and you make a great point, and I think it's one of the biggest risks of this centralization movement is that floor just dropping out, right? As people are moving and putting more on an individual shoulders, or they're removing human touch points from a property altogether and running out of a centralized office somewhere remote, it's really easy for that floor to drop out if there isn't still a consistent line of communication, if there isn't still transparency and visibility to what's happening through the property, if there isn't a way for residents to raise their concerns and, more importantly, feel like those concerns are being addressed. And one of the big things that went hand in hand with the deployment of the lean methodology is this great program book written by Carol Dweck on growth mindset, right? And you speak to decision making, and it was applicable to employees as well as to customers of how much more pliable an individual is when they are in a growth mindset, right? When they feel heard, valued, understood, safe, and supported. That has a drastic influence on how they make their decisions, and particularly how they respond to those moments of crisis or to those moments of friction, right? And so when you talk about like raising the floor, that's what it is, right? Are you creating a foundation of fear, or are you creating a foundation of growth and support so that issues feel surmountable rather than barriers to survival, to put it in cave person terms?
But and it's interesting because like there was the whole delight movement that was going on and on and on. And there's a really have you read the book The Effortless Experience?
Yeah.
Like Matt Dixon nails it, right? And he talks about like it's less to do with delighting customers and more to do with like helping them get their job done.
Yep.
Right. And then what's the job? It's like kind of like Clayton Christensen mashed up with Effortless Experience, but the whole combination around like if you make it easy to solve the problem I'm trying to solve, and this problem you're trying to solve could be just like reliable, safe, affordable housing. I mean, not affordable, like not technically affordable, but within my budget housing, right? Reliable, safe, easy access, all those things within my budget housing. And then this is another kind of thread point talking about like home ownership, right? Like home ownership versus rentals. Like now the world is defined as home seekers versus homeowners and residents, because the problem we're trying to solve is safe, within my budget, easy housing. And that could be ownership is just a financial arrangement. And so what does that look like? How does that change, right? The way that we solve this resident experience problem. Because like, it's funny, like no one said it out loud, but like the resident experience is the revenue experience.
Yep.
And let's connect those dots even tighter and make it more connected,
Yep.
especially those of us in the CX or resident experience space.
Yeah,
you're right.
It's only going to grow. I think 2 years ago, University of Michigan put out a study alongside the HUD where it says by 2050, 87% of Americans are going to live in urban city centers, right? And, I don't know, how many cities you've been in recently, but there isn't a ton of home ownership opportunities in those dense urban markets, right? And so we're talking about this huge growth trajectory and this seismic shift, to your point, of home seekers versus home ownership, right? And feeling like you have an ownership stake or an invested stake wherever you live, whether it's an apartment or a condo or a home.
And to carry it even further, if you look at the generation that's home seeking right now, they're used to subscribing to everything. Yeah. Ownership is kind of a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Whether it be a book, a record, a car, everything, top to bottom. Like you got subscription shopping, right? Groceries, subscription growth, everything is available on a SaaS model. And so why wouldn't my housing be in the same? And I think that I do think that the constraints of ownership are going to shape less of a stigma around, or hopefully are going to less a stigma around renting versus buying, because it sure as heck doesn't exist in car ownership anymore. Yep. And so like, why should it exist in housing? So we're getting on a tangent, but like bringing it all together, right? Like this is the new model. And so when we talk about hell yes, right, we're talking about resident experience is the revenue experience. Is revenue important to you? Yes. Is your asset valuation valuable to you? Yes. This is a key service that people are going to need. We're the largest demographic of people home seeking right now since the baby boomers. Mm-hmm. And so this is something that is now a priority, but it's a conundrum because we don't have the mindsets around solving the problems a new way.
Yep.
And so like we centralize and it could be considered to be a less of a human experience. The but is that we make it more convenient and we make it a little, it's not an in-person experience, but it's a remote experience that is equally as impactful because it's that much more accessible.
Yep. And so can be equally as human.
And it can be equally as human. Right. And so it's like, how do you create that? How does technology bridge that gap that is like people are like, it's like they're trying to start their car and it's just stalled out. Like you just hear the starter going, nah, 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 nah. and it's not turning over because they're stuck in not being able to think about what the new way looks like. And it's part of us, like this is the best part about talking to folks in the seller space, is that part of our job is to build narratives that make it safe to choose the new future. When you guys are out there looking around, you get, I mean, not everyone's going to buy. What kind of objections do you guys usually hear?
Yeah, I think you touched on it earlier in our conversation. By and large, the largest is the change management piece, right? It's the impact that implementing a new system or new process is going to have on a team that is maybe already feeling spread thin. I would say far and away, that's the number one objection is especially once they realize how comprehensive Lively can be, right? Any of our solutions can be available ad hoc or a la carte, but it really works best as an operating system with all of its components. And once they realize that and appreciate that value, then the wheels immediately go to, well, how am I going to roll this out across 10,000 units or 50,000 units, and what's that impact going to be on my people? And so, we've done a lot of work, going back to my previous comment about our customer success team, of being that ongoing partner in helping to manage that change and that transformation. And then I think the other piece that comes up as an objection frequently, I also spoke to a little bit earlier, is just there's so much confusion in the market, and there's so much double talk, and there's so much double meaning to words that should be, like sacred and critical to a resident technology solution. But everybody puts their own spin or definition on it. And so the decision makers can easily get overwhelmed because they're hearing from three or four different vendors that they accomplish the same feature, but the outcome is vastly different. The way it's delivered is vastly different. And so then it's like, I guess we need to do a lot more research on this topic, right? Or, we need to understand what questions to ask, or really what we're trying to solve in the space here. And so then we get into that like nurturing aspect of the sales relationship of positioning ourselves as the subject matter experts, of being a partner and helping them get to the right solution. And hopefully that solution is Lively. But at the end of the day, we're going to put our reputation on the line, and we're not going to shoehorn somebody into a solution that isn't accomplishing what they've identified as their ultimate outcome or their ultimate goal. Right? But we're going to stay as that partner through the whole process and help them feel equipped and armed to make an educated and informed decision once they get to that decision point.
So that kind of brings up kind of closing in the questions here. Like that decision, people make decisions based on like people being forced to make a decision has an element of the time. They need to have something done by a certain time. And so other sales books call it the time wall, but it's like basically in sales, when you're talking about revenue, it's always like, hey, I've got a quarter to hit. And so how do you, the questions are always like, what are you doing this quarter? What's your plan? It's all related to the quarter. In customer experience or recurring revenue businesses, that it can kind of drip through the natural time walls that exist in business. So how do you guys find people that need to make a decision by a certain time?
Yeah, I would say that they end up being our stickiest customers because we're enabling that sense of urgency they have to get the information they need, right? We've been doing this since 2017. Like I said, we were built by owners and operators, and so we know the pain points, we speak the language. And so when somebody has to deliver by a time, we provide, a digital design architecture as they're picking their hardware stack for the property, from front door access control to unit door access control to smart devices in the apartments. We've got a whole network of partners and players that we're integrated with. And we bring them all together and we talk about what resident experience they're trying to deliver on what budget, and then help them understand where to go fish to get the solution that they need. And I think when they partner with us, we are able to sort of help guide and shepherd through that process rather than just having to go to Google and drink from the fire hose of everybody's, SEO optimization and marketing collateral and YouTube videos.
100 pages all built by GPT, the same GPT.
Exactly.
Everyone looks the same.
Exactly. And so we really lean into those relationships. And it's, when I first took over sales operations going on 2 years ago now, it really started from a simple framework, which is connect, discover, respond. And that was the DNA of our sales process. And so some customers, the connection process takes longer, and to build that trust and to establish that transparency and actually be honest with us. What are you trying to solve? What are your pain points? And then discovering what they've been trying, what they're learning, what's working, what's not working, and then responding in a way that is meaningful to their unique situation. And so from the moment we get that, inbound lead, or we make that connection at a conference, or we get on that first phone call, we're nurturing this relationship all the way through to close. And then we're picking up as an operations partner alongside with them for the lifetime of their relationship with Lively. And so really leaning into the connect, discover, respond allows us to meet customers where they're at in their decision-making cycle and whatever timelines they might be on.
Connect, discover, respond. I'm going to capture that. That'll be in the show notes. That's awesome. Do you guys find when you're in the conversation of folks, and we have people that don't buy, everyone does. What happens if they don't do something?
Yeah, I mean, we've never burned bridges, right? We always stand as a partner. When we lose a deal, we still reach out at conferences and have conversations and just see how things are going, right? And see if their needs are being met. Normally, when that happens, it's because we fell down somewhere along the way in that connect or discovery or in our response, and so we didn't pull the right levers of how our solution solves the problem that's in front of them. And so then sometimes it just takes time for them to go and, fail somewhere else or run into the same problems. And then, we call those boomerang customers where, they gave us 7 no's and then they come back and it's a yes, because they now understand the value of what we were trying to accomplish.
There's a great, and I'm sure it's misquoted, but the story goes with Walt Disney trying to get funding for Disneyland. And the story goes that he went and saw 308 banks, and then the 309th bank financed Disneyland, right? And Walt Disney's response was, I needed to learn 308 times before the deal was worth accepting, right? And I love that perspective, because that's growth mindset in a nutshell, in a capsule, right? Is that he took it on him to be accountable for the learning from each one of those engagements so that he could present a proposal that was worth funding. It wasn't, I was getting a bunch of no's. What I was getting feedback that my proposal wasn't good enough. And 308 times you hone anything that often, you're going to get there. But I share the same approach in that, folks maybe not, 2 comments, that maybe they're not ready to buy, and that's okay. That's totally okay. And that's part of this whole hell yes conversation, is bringing them into that hell yes funnel. And then secondly, the idea that it's not for everyone. I think one of the most empowering conversations that I had with someone who didn't buy from us was when I felt comfortable enough to recommend a competitor for their problem versus continuously try to tell them how we're incrementally better than what their competitor could do, but saying, if that's your problem, you really should do this. And maybe something's going to happen down the road, but have you considered that? And then I ran into that prospect at a conference and said, thank you very much for that recommendation. We did buy from XYZ and it was incredible. And then what they said was, but we have this other problem that you solve. Could you help us with that? And then that became a customer, right? And that felt awesome. But it took us a long time to be able to position to say, we don't do that. we don't do that well.
Yep.
You know. So what's the one piece of advice you give people that are coming into the business? I mean, particularly as a revenue leader, people are coming in. What do you tell them?
Yeah, I think the biggest piece is humans want to do business with humans, right? And so,
Yes.
your 1,000 distribution list, drip emails, and just throwing dynamite in the pond, you're not going to get nearly the same return on that as investing the time to understand your customer, to build that connection, to really discover their needs. And yeah, maybe your KPI on activity numbers might dip a little bit, but I promise your conversion and the value of your deals and the stickiness of that customer relationship will more than make up for it in dividends to the company on the back end.
Love it. And I think that the thing we all got to figure out is how to do that at scale.
Yep.
Because there is a top of funnel motion that has to exist. You can't get, stuck on trying to make sure everything is perfect, but you gotta, that's part of the whole hell yes thing, is finding the match, right? And then doing that at scale in ways that they're ready to absorb it. That's awesome. Who should we talk to next?
Yeah, I referenced the Multifamily Innovation Council earlier, and the chair of that council, Patrick Antrim, if you haven't had him on yet, is doing just incredible things with his companies around leveraging artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
But he's really bringing together this council of operators and suppliers to really shape and understand the way the conversation is happening in prop tech today. And it has such great insights, brings in guest speakers, is just really trying to not just understand the current landscape in the supplier and operator relationship, but how to frame how that conversation moves forward. I think he would be a great conversation in this forum.
Outstanding. I'll definitely get a hold of him. I appreciate that. How can folks get a hold of you?
LinkedIn is probably the best way. I'm on there way more than I like to admit. Or send a note at dshaw@lively.io. But I'm digitally connected 24/7, and so find me, ping me, say hi. Let's grab coffee. Let's grab an espresso martini at a conference.
There you go.
However, we can build that relationship.
And you will be at RETCon, so you'll be available there.
Yep.
So if people go to RETCon, grab you there. I'll try and we'll connect over there as well. Wonderful. Thanks everyone for listening today. This has been a super interesting show. My punchlines are around connect, discover, respond. I really we'll put our own spin on that, but I really like that language and thinking in terms of have them come to you. It's not connect, talk, tell. It's connect, ask questions, learn, and then respond to their questions. I think that's outstanding for people to take as a takeaway. Appreciate you sharing that. Everyone listening to you today on live, this will be on the LinkedIn Live, so there'll be some pop-ups around that come out in the next couple of weeks. This will be on the podcast in probably a week and a half or so, and watch out for the blog stuff there. Follow us on Apple, Spotify, add comments, links, reviews. Those are all good to keep the conversation going. And thank you for everyone that engaged on LinkedIn. It always makes the conversation much more interesting, and feel free to add comments to the LinkedIn Live as it's out there. We'll respond accordingly. Thanks everyone for joining today. Thank you, David. This is super interesting and valuable for everyone listening and valuable for me. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll chat next time. Take care. Bye.
Bye, everyone.